So, hello and welcome, guys, for the first time with me on the Coach's Corner. And then on the other end, we have, for once, Steve Hall here, and then Harry Smith. We were intended to do a different form of an episode here this time, together with Jess. Then Jess couldn't because her internet connection at her mom's place isn't that good. Then we wanted to actually do it with Ryan. There's a heavy storm happening in Iowa at the moment. And then we decided to actually go with Harry this time around. So, hi, Harry, how are you doing, buddy?
It's always great to be the last choice, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't ask Mike, so...
Okay,
you weren't
second from the bottom.
You weren't the very last choice though. So yeah, how are you doing?
I'm all good. It feels like a very long time since I was last on. It was the coaching corner.
It was. Yeah, it was like 2 months now.
Was it that long?
Because,
oh my god.
Yeah, we are trying to bring out an episode per month. So this is episode number 3. And this time we are going to talk about 3 biggest mistakes around training and nutrition for every one of us. And probably it is kind of very similar because it's this question or this topic is rather stemming from the forum, because Harry at one point actually created a forum post where he asked, like, okay, what were the biggest mistakes the 3 biggest mistakes that everyone was doing in regards to training and nutrition, and everyone was then basically talking very openly about it. And there were a couple of things that were kind of very similar to another. And I don't know, Steve, do you want to start with maybe the first one for you, and then we can just like move in circles and talk about the training and nutritional mistakes each and everyone has done?
Totally. Can you hear Ada in the background, by the way? She's having dog dreams.
Dog
Fantastic.
Dreams.
It's like...
chasing something.
Yeah. I wish the audience could hear her in the background because it's quite cute. Anyway, so yeah, I think the easy one for me to start with, because it was something I obviously made a big mistake in the past and I've rectified. I feel like I rectified it maybe like 4 years ago, so I haven't even rectified it like that long ago, was nutrition. I was doing the whole like eating protein, clean eating, but I had no idea about energy balance. So I would just like try and eat very little, eat lots of fruit and veg, eat protein, and like try and gain muscle and hope that I could gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. And I just kind of looked really kind of like, I don't know, like not skinny fat because I wasn't fat. I was just like skinny. And that was definitely one of the biggest things that held me back at the beginning. And I can even remember like I joke with my friends at school and be like, yeah, we're like eat big to get big. And I think I always had a little bit of a mental block to that sort of mentality. Like they would go and like, I don't know, get a Subway, a Snickers, and like a milkshake from the supermarket. Whereas I just was like, no, I should be having like my, like, I don't know, chicken and like salad and things like this. And I can remember like getting my mum to create tuna sandwiches for me at school with a whole tin of tuna between 2 slices of bread because I didn't want more carbs. And then I'd have like crudité and all of this. Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was like...
Did it all fall
into just to interrupt you there, I kind of done the same thing where I just like ordered kind of a bun and then a whole tuna can. I put it inside the bun and then I just ate it that way.
Yeah.
Like that was sometimes my breakfast.
At least I had mayonnaise. Like I was like, but use a very small amount. Low fat, small amount of mayonnaise. Those I actually remember enjoying those sandwiches, but it was just, that was like the mentality I took at the start. And I think it's why I really didn't grow anywhere near as much muscle as I could have. So my newbie gains were like not great at all. And I know a lot of people talk about how like, yeah, you should grow your most in the first years. It's like, well, yeah, if you have everything set up right. And I just think so many people don't. And having a surplus is just one of the biggest things you can do to help yourself. So it wasn't until I realized, like being in a surplus, and I kind of, I don't know, people talk about, if you want to build an extension on a house, you need to have extra fuel. So I was like, oh yeah, sold on that. So then I did a surplus and I just went wild with it. I was like looking to gain like literally half a stone in a week. So like 7 pounds. I was just aiming for a pound a day, basically. That's what my goal was. So I shot up in body fat like mad. This was like after my accident, so part of it was, I don't know, probably recovery eating and also like gaining back some muscle I'd lost whilst being in hospital. But again, that was like a quote unquote clean bulk, and I was thinking, I'm only going to gain muscle, and then like a few months down the line I was like, man, I'm looking really podgy right now. And then I think that's when I eventually came across, I think bodyrecomposition.com and Alan Aragon, and at first I was like, fuck these guys, like what is this macros, if it fits your macros? I was like, no, it has to be clean eating. But slowly I started like learning from them and incorporating it, and things just started changing a lot. But from being kind of that, kind of, for me it was fat and quite overweight, I held myself back since then with not going into a surplus. So yeah, my biggest one is like not understanding energy balance and also holding myself back with the not being in a surplus.
What kind of changed then for you? Or when was the key moment where you said like, okay, this can't be going on like this for the next couple of years?
I think it was like, if I was, I don't think I can pinpoint one time, but I can say something that really struck me was when Mike Israetel came over for the first seminar, which was 2015 or 16, something like that. Oh. One of those years. And he was talking about like massing in the off season. He talked about this peanut butter scale and basically said, like, you can rate like where you are in terms of satiety on this peanut butter scale. Like cutting peanut butter is like amazing. As you're bulking, it's okay. And then you get to a point where you look at peanut butter and it's just like, this is the most disgusting thing on earth. And I was like, I have never got to that point in a mass. And I didn't think I'd ever get there. And I started looking into like learning from Mike more from that point onwards, because he just presented the information with James so well. And he's been on the more assertive side with rates of gain, kind of a meaningful surplus. And he used to be a bit more pushy back in the day. He's kind of calmed that down a little bit. And so I just started moving my expectations more towards that. And that really opened my eyes, especially also competing 2014 to 2017. And my stage weight was the same. Whilst I think I improved for sure, like I definitely did. And it was clear with how I kind of did in terms of competing against others, I don't think I gained anywhere as much muscle as I should have. So then it was like, my mindset set, like, let's make sure I'm getting every bit of muscle I can by being in a meaningful surplus. So yeah, that for me probably was the trigger, or at least when I'm thinking back, at least it was.
Yeah, Harry, what about yours? What's the first point for you that comes to your mind?
Biggest mistake was something I probably didn't really become self-aware of until maybe a couple of years ago, and I spoke about it a bit on Instagram. But my biggest mistake was feeling like I was smarter than everyone else. I felt like the reason I wasn't making progress or something like that was because I didn't know enough, and I felt like I didn't have to do what my friends were doing to get bigger and stuff like that, because I thought I could just create the most scientific and the most perfect plan, and then that way I would be able to gain muscle in a deficit, or that way I'd be able to make progress much faster than other people were. So for example, I first started training at the same time as one of my friends at the time, and he basically had an amazing newbie gains phase. All he did was buy like a year's supply of serious mass and then just hammer that, but also just train. But he would train to failure and everything. But it obviously, as a newbie, training to failure is a little bit different to training to failure as someone who's experienced. But the thing that he had was he was training a lot. He was training with intensity, and he was shuttling so many calories into his body that his body had like no excuse but to grow. And then there was me, who was basically training with him but trying to do almost like the opposite approach. It was almost like, if you're going to do it this way, then I'm going to do a shit ton of research, and then I'm going to come up with this amazing program. And it doesn't matter that I'm not making progress right now, because I'm going to make more progress later once I've got my amazing plan in place. And then I basically spent like 3 years training in a deficit, because coming from a background of being a fat kid, I just was always trying to get abs. So I was basically trying to get abs and trying to mass at the same time. And then I was constantly changing the training program all the time. I was trying to implement RPE, but really badly, like trying to train not to failure all the time, but it probably resulted in me being at like 5 reps in reserve all the time. I was way too focused on good technique, and I was always looking for the next best shiny thing. And in the meantime, I made some gains, but not like the best gains. A bit like you, Steve. I feel like I kind of squandered my newbie gains phase, and I could have got a lot more out of it. And then this friend I had at the time went from looking like he didn't even lift and being a skinny kid to looking absolutely jacked. And he probably grew, because he still trains now, but he probably grew 90% of the muscle mass he has now back in that first year. Whereas I feel like it took me like 8 or 9 years to grow all the muscle mass that I've had. And I just feel like I completely messed up that phase. And if I just focused on, like basically I thought I was too good for the basics. That's what the problem was. I thought I don't need to do these big heavy compound lifts. I can just do all these technical mechanical drop set things and do loads and loads of isolation stuff, and that my style of training was superior. And then it basically was a bit of a rude awakening when I kind of thought to myself, like, why is he making so much more progress than I am? Like, what am I doing wrong? And I kept searching for what I was doing wrong, even though it was so obvious. What I was doing wrong was I wasn't eating enough, I wasn't training hard enough, and I wasn't being consistent enough. That's what it came down to at the end of the day. Because I would chastise my friend for the fact that he was following the same training plan for like 15, 16 weeks straight. And it's like, well, I was changing mine like every 2 weeks. So of course I wasn't making much progress. I was never spending enough time with a movement pattern to develop any skill in that movement pattern to get to the point where I could even grow muscle in the first place. So yeah, I could go on about it forever. What about you?
Did you realize it for yourself that something needs to change, or did anyone tell you?
A bit of both. There was a more experienced PT than me in the gym that I worked in who acted a bit like a mentor for me. And he put together a program for me when I started working at the gym, because he basically said to me politely, he was a really nice guy. He said, I'm paraphrasing here. He said, you're training like an idiot. You should follow this plan. It'll probably result in more growth. And I took one look at him, and because he was in like his mid 40s, he had a lot of muscularity, but he wasn't like bodybuilder jacked. And at the time I was completely blinded by like fake natties and IFBB pros and stuff. So he gave me this plan, which I remember like, one of the workouts was like an upper body session. It was like barbell bench press, like 4 times 6 to 8, bent over barbell row 4 times 6 to 8, and then like an overhead press and pull-ups, and then like 3 sets of bicep curls and 3 sets of tricep extensions. So it's like just a solid basic workout. And then I kind of took one look at this program and was like, nah, there's not enough arms, there's not enough blah, 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 blah. And then basically just didn't even follow it. And then yeah, and then I make this joke now. I've even spoke to him since. I was like, when you gave me that training program, I looked at it and thought, what a load of shit. And then now I look at my own training programs and they're almost identical. So I said, if I'd only listened to you like 8 years ago, I could have skipped that whole 6-year period of BS and not making any progress.
But this is so interesting, because I think that so many people are falling into that category. That they think they know better, especially know better than the bros, especially in our community and small niche where we are evidence-based. We know better because there's the literature supporting our claims, right? But in the end, what does it all matter if you're not putting in the work and effort and having the fundamental principles in check, right? And your friend, he ticked off the boxes that are most important, and that is like going in there, and we said it in one of the improvement season podcasts, right? You have to train hard. You have to, right? Because everything else will not work otherwise. And we are not saying the lazy kind of statement of like, yeah, train hard, eat big, because that's just like a very lazy statement in it for itself, right? Because it doesn't really serve any kind of purpose, doesn't give any kind of context to the individual. But in it for itself, there is some validity. If you don't do this, you will not grow. And I think that many, many people in the evidence-based field, they fall into that. And that's also the reason why they do get so much shit from a specific group of people, and especially the bros and so. And I do understand where this is coming from, right? Because you see it all the time that they are justifying their behavior. And this is where I was myself as well. I was there. I was that guy who was just like trying to justify my non-progress with science. No, I'm doing this and it will lead somewhere at some point because science says so. But it never actually got me somewhere, right? Because science can only tell you that much. But it doesn't do the training for you, right? And sometimes it doesn't really tell you what is appropriate for you, right? And I think that so many people are falling into that category. And even when I had no idea whatsoever, there is a forum here in Germany that is called Team Andro. This is one of the biggest forums. Team Andro, just Andro, but yeah. This is one of the biggest forums there is, and they are like giving out, it's kind of bodybuilding.com just here in Germany, right? And they are giving out a lot of programs. And I do remember at a time where I had no idea. I was looking at the plan and it said like, I think it was called like 10-week beach body transformation or so, right? But it was basically the same as you laid out as well. Like It was taking off the fundamental principles. And I just looked over it, and it was already put off by the name and from the community, because I didn't want to be that kind of bodybuilder, right? I was just like, no, I know better. I can create a better program than this. And then I did something like lean gains, which just like, I didn't see any kind of growth during that time because it was way too little volume for someone like me, way too little. And I also, when it comes to the intensity, I had no idea what proper intensity looks like, what it feels like. And also the intensity that I then put in was just accumulating a lot of fatigue because I didn't have the technique in check. So what's it worth when you're doing a lot of intensity and it just fucks you up because you are not putting the intensity towards the muscle groups that you're trying to hit, but also towards the joints and tendons and ligaments, right? But yeah, this is a common phenomenon I typically see, especially in our small little niche.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you summed up perfectly the mistake I was trying to explain. And yeah, no, I'm just in complete agreement with you, Pascal. I was nodding all the way through, just thinking like, yeah, you've just said it a lot better than I said it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I could imagine that there are people listening to this episode. When they are very honest with themselves, they are still in that kind of mindset and in that position where they are not seeing the progress they would like to, but they are trying desperately to find the solution for it. And the solution isn't like that super fancy scientific thing, but probably it's way more obvious, way more bro-ish, way more simplistic. But because it's so simplistic and so much basically in their face already, they are blind to it. Right? It's like you not appreciating the love that is by your side because you take it for granted. Right? And thus you are blinded for the person who really is by your side, supports you all the time, is always there for you, loves you with all of their heart and love. But you simply don't care, right? And you go out there, cheat on that person all the time because you simply don't appreciate it. You simply can't see it. That's the same thing there as well, right? And I had to come to that realization myself, which brings me kind of to one of the points that I wanted to talk about. And that is basically being fully caught up in the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Thinking I know what intensity looks like. Thinking I know what proper training looks like. And I had no idea. Each and every single year I look back and be like, holy shit, I knew nothing a year ago. And I even knew less 2 years ago. And 5 years ago, I was clueless, right? And I bet my ass off, like in 1 year from now, I will look back at this moment in time and be once again, I knew nothing. Perhaps over time, it then shrinks and will kind of flatten out where I'm just like getting more and more satisfied with the things that I know, the outcome, and also the progress that I'm seeing. But in the beginning, I had no idea, right? I fucked myself up big time. And I saw no progress whatsoever because also here I neglected so many things that were just like fundamentally important, but I wanted to actually skip these parts that are important. Right, and jump straight into the things that are way too advanced for me, that were kind of outside of my reach. It's like I wanted to be or train like a professional when in reality I was an absolutely beginner. It's like, yeah, being a professional sportsman. You play football with your mates and you're the best there, right? You crush them every single time, and you think like, yeah, because I'm just dominating them each and every single time. I have what it takes to actually become a professional. And then you actually play against professionals and it's way outside of your league. And that's the same thing here, kind of. I jumped the gun and I wasn't ready for the things that I wanted to do. And because of that, I should have listened to what many people are saying. Like, focus on the most important and fundamental pieces first. Proper technique, right? Build that mind-muscle connection. Sometimes I wish I would have been a little bit more like a bro.
Fast, efficient fat loss? Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cut movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cut movement.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wish because I've got quite a few gyms near me, and when I was like 18, getting into training for the first time, I went to the cheapest gym, and I reckon I could have fast tracked my newbie gains if I'd gone to the like proper old school bodybuilding style gym. It was a 30-minute commute away, but even though I don't like that gym now, I feel like that's what I needed in my early days, because that would have, in hindsight, I feel like that would have given me that newbie gains progress that I missed out on, because I was training in a place where, even with what we said, I was still training the hardest there, even though I wasn't making any progress. It was just like, like a local authority run gym where the equipment hasn't been updated for like 10 years, and there's like PTs there who wear polo shirts and have zero interest in actually like speaking to anyone. It's kind of like that place, where they have a swimming pool and stuff as well. That was the one I went to when I should have gone to the one with like the actual jack guys. Like there was no one jacked in my gym, in my first gym I went to. But yeah, 100%. Just searching for the secret, thinking there was a secret to why I wasn't making progress, when the problem was all the things we've already spoken about.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry. Just because I wanted to further elaborate on that point. Thing is that I wasted a lot of years. I had no one around me who was interested in lifting and training and nutrition. So that was a problem in it for itself, because I had no mentor to actually guide me. And that's why I then went, of course, online. And then thinking you know better, when in reality you have no experience at all, you had no one to show or guide you, right? It's just like you're making a fool out of yourself. And I've wasted years on that one, just to come to the realization to actually then go back again. And this is something that I've even experienced when I was learning the bass guitar. I was also there self-taught. Right, back in the days, or back during that time, I didn't really have access to something like YouTube. It wasn't around during that time. And that's why I think nowadays you can learn so much more efficiently via online courses or so, especially also when it comes to like learning an instrument. But back in the days, it was just like I had some tabs, and then based off of that, I actually taught myself playing the bass guitar. And I made a lot of mistakes, which then got ingrained in the technique I was then, or how I played. When I then went to my bass guitar teacher, like a couple of years later, he basically said, like, Pascal, we need to actually fix a lot of the mistakes that you've now ingrained, because they will make you less efficient over time. They may not be a problem now, but in the future, if you really want to become good, they will hinder you in making progress. So we actually needed to take a lot of steps back and restart from the get-go. And this is something that stuck very much with me. And this has also carried over so much into lifting as well. And I see it all the time, that so many people approach us as athletes, and we have to fix a lot of things. And this doesn't come from a bad place. I'm not doing this, and I'm not taking them through this process just to give them a hard time or just to be like an arsehole, when in reality they want to see the changes. But this is important in order to make long-term changes and not just short-term changes. If you just want to see like short-term gratification, sure, we can actually put you onto a diet, then you have a great before and after picture, but it doesn't really set yourself up for a long-term success when it comes to really making a change. And that's why sometimes you have to be the bass guitar teacher and say like, okay, we need to fix it now, because these kind of things have ingrained itself so much that they will become a problem later down the line. Especially like when it comes to training and nutrition, when you're not in the beginner phase anymore, but you're now at an intermediate phase, and redoing things then, it's so much harder than trying to actually fix it then, more so in the beginning of your lifting career or years, right? And that's why I'm I very much appreciate it when clients are open-minded about it and willing then to say, okay, yes, let's do this. And once again, big shout out to one of my man, Chris Merrick, because I was doing this exact same thing here with him for a year now. We've tried to fix a lot of on the technique side of things, mind-muscle connection, just awareness of intensity. And now, after a year of working on that, he still make progress though. But especially now, we can add some more quantity because we finally have that quality in check.
I think, unfortunately, I was going to say to your point there, Pascal, and it sounds like all of us did this. When you first get into this, you look at training and you hear advanced and you think advanced is superior. You think advanced means quicker muscle growth. But in fact, advanced means this is for someone advanced, of which no beginner is advanced by default. You're a beginner, so you should be doing the basics, which I think so many of us, I'm thinking of that meme where that girl's like taking a big step and she's skipping over everything. It's like she's going to the advanced program. She's missed all the beginner, the technique, and all of that kind of lessons and learning that are imperative to be able to even use an advanced program. And I could list off all the different programs that I did, and even some of them were good. So I do I think it was Brian Haycock's hypertrophy specific training. And I loved it because it was specific rest times. It was periodized, and I just didn't need that. I didn't need it. And then I'd make this mistake as well. And I imagine the listeners would be the same, whether it be someone I look up to who is where I want to be, and I follow their program. So it's like Matt Ogus was the guy. So I would follow everything basically he would do. And I'm like, why aren't I as jacked as Matt yet? And it's like, well, he's been training and I should look at what he's done to maybe get there. And then even if you look at the guys who are like the top of the top advanced, a lot of those guys have amazing genetics. So they're kind of there despite what they did. And it's not until you have been doing this a long time, you learn, oh, there's people who have gone through the process of they're similar to me. They didn't have amazing genetics, but they look great now. Let's look at what they're telling me to do as a beginner. And that's when it's like, the nail starts to hit. You start realizing these things and you start kind of nailing down, like you said, all those basics, like the technique. And so, for clients that come to us, it's so important to look at their form and technique and their intensity. And you don't want to give them more when they haven't got that right. So not only respect to Chris for that, but respect for you, because it'll be easy because he would like it if you would give him more. I'm sure like a lot of people are just like, they're begging for it, but you're like, no. You got to get this nailed down first.
And funny enough, I just yesterday posted my SLDLs. And I said then on my stories, like, guess the RAR. And I know that's always hard to do, looking on it from the outside, because I mean, we are all a little bit different when it comes to also fast twitch muscle fibers, how much we can grind things out, yada, yada, yada. So gauging the RAR is something that I never like doing when someone is asking me, like, do you think that this was 3 RAR? Honestly, I can't really tell you that, because it's so hard to actually, especially on an hypertrophic kind of style of training, when it comes to something like a 2 RM or even 1 RM, there most of the time it's a little bit easier to estimate or gauge that one. But even then, I once brought up the example where I've seen Bryce Lewis doing a live session where he streamed that and said like, okay, I'm going for an AMRAP set on my squats. And people were just like saying, "This, you had so much more in you." And he said like, no, this was all out. I had no RPE left here, or no rep left anymore. And people were just like, no, you had 3 or 4 more. When the world champion says like he has nothing left, you better believe that he has, right? And the keyboard warrior doesn't know that. And that's why I very much don't like to be the guy and estimate or gauging the RA of someone else, because I don't know what it felt like for them, especially when they're doing a hypertrophic kind of style of training. Anyway, one of my athletes, he actually then said like, yeah, 1 to 2 RA. And I said no, it was a 4 RA. I can wholeheartedly say that. Right? But this is exactly where you need to be at. If your 4 RER is just a breeze, sorry, I really do think that you're doing something wrong. Like, honestly, a 4 RER still needs my focus and my attention and my concentration to properly execute that and get as much out of that as possible. And if not, then I think you need to work on your focus, because then you definitely leave something on the table. And this is also a skill that needs to be developed. That doesn't happen in the first couple of years of your lifting career, unless you're coming from somewhat of a sports background where you needed to push yourself all the time and your tolerance is already very high and understanding of how far you can push your body. But most of the people don't, right? And in that scenario, it just taught me and showed me once again that I think the understanding that many people have what 4 RER is, what 3 RER is, I think that many people still leave a lot on the table because of their true perception of it. And funny enough, I had a very, very cool trick from Arne, your client, Steve. I was on his podcast, and he basically told me a trick that he's using for some of his athletes in the overreaching week. When you're then having some sets or some exercises pushing to 0 RER or 1 RER, he does a very cool trick that I've now implemented with a lot of my athletes as well, is you set up your mobile device, hit the record button for the first set maybe of an exercise, and you don't count the reps. You only focus on proper execution, and you do everything but counting the reps. The mobile device will count the reps for you, and you will look back then, right? And then you can count the reps when you are then re-watching the footage of the recorded lift. Because sometimes you're just like too much in your own head. Sometimes you have already made up a number that you are hitting, and then you are convinced by it that this was a 2 RER. And by doing this in the overreaching week, when you're pushing to 0 RER or 1 RER, you can basically very much shit test yourself. And if you are surprising yourself, then you have the numbers for the next mesocycle already laid out, and then you can actually make some new adjustments, right? And if not, then hey, you didn't lose anything. Now you just proven to yourself that you are actually very accurate when it comes to the RER. And if not, now you know. Right? And this was a very cool trick I've never thought of when it comes to the overreaching week, of just letting the mobile device count the reps for you, look back, and sometimes be very surprised about how far you actually could push it.
It's interesting you say that, because that's something I was doing without being aware of it myself anyway. Because the focus I need to get into in my head to do my overreaching week, I always forget to count. Like, because I can't, it's the first thing that my brain drops when I'm trying to focus on the execution with the really, really high intensity. So I always find I finish the set and I'm like, how many did I do? And I always check my phone because I record my hardest sets. And I nearly always am like 3 or 4 reps off in my head from where I thought I was, just because I can't manage all those things at once during the set.
So I have an idea, and I would assume that it's already out on the market, but maybe not, and then we can get rich.
Maybe we should stop recording now before you say it.
Yeah.
Cut it out.
So, yeah. Or maybe someone is actually telling us. So is there a device, like a step counter, that you can put around the barbell or the weights that is then counting the movement and noticing like a movement pattern and counting then the reps for that?
I think there is something that it's called like rep count or something really obvious like that. I feel like I've heard of it.
I'm not talking about an app or so, right? Where it's just like, recording basically yourself and seeing like the movement patterns or so. And I'm also not talking about a tendo unit where it's a cable attached to the bar, but really just like a small chip or so that you can also then put on a machine, for example, on the weight stack of the machine, and that it just notice the movement. That would be amazing. Then you have a true rep counter, because sometimes I'm actually messing up my reps. Where it's like, okay, was this now 8 repetitions, or did I actually do 9?
Reps are arbitrary anyway.
Yeah.
Like
it is kind of
important. Like
it is.
I work with people in person, which is something that you guys don't do that much, like unless you kind of meet up with someone for a workout. And generally with a lot of my clients I work with in person, I disregard the rep range for the most part, because I'm trying to teach them how to train hard. So just because their program might say like 8 to 12 reps, they'll get to 12 and they'll kind of say they're on bench press, I'll get to 12, they'll look at me like, And I'm like, no, keep going. And then sometimes what they thought was their 10 rep max, we get like 22, 23 reps on. And they're like, but we did 20 reps. I'm like, but we hit failure. So like that was what was important at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important message as well. Only because you have a rep target of 8 to 12 repetitions doesn't mean that you need to
bullshit.
stop
it doesn't,
at 12 because you can't exceed that. No one is punishing you for exceeding that repetition range, right? If that's the case, you just proven to yourself that you perhaps can go up in weight for the next perhaps set or for the next session then.
Yeah, I thought what you were going to say, Pascal, is what Arnie does, and I was going to say he got this from me, but it's not anything magical. It wasn't. What you told me there was not something I've ever actually even thought of or done. So it's very interesting.
No, neither did I. And I was on the podcast and he told me and I was just like, holy shit, that is so simplistic and such a great idea, which I have already implemented that with a couple of my athletes. And it turned out with some of them, it was just like, some exercises, they were very accurate when it comes to the RER. And some, they very much surprised themselves, where it was just like 4 or 5 repetitions off. Most of the time, it was really on the lower body lifts, such as the leg press or the hack squats, because you can grind out so many more repetitions with good form.
Leg press is never ending.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the kind of tricks, not a trick, but basically if someone's 0 to 1 RER week is a dramatic performance increase from the first week, where it's like, well, you should either get like 4 extra reps or like 10 kilos, something like that, not like 20 kilos extra or like 20 extra reps or something crazy. If they're significantly different, I'm like, well, what happened there? You've obviously gone way too easy at the start. But like you said there, once people have taken it to that failure point, you have now a baseline of numbers for your next week, for the next mesocycle. So I think a lot of people just going through one single mesocycle of using RER that's eventually finishing in failure training, you've learned a shit ton. But if you record it, then you actually get to shit test whether or not your form got sloppy or you kept your form or you pussied out. One thing I'd worry about with recording and not knowing your number is that people would like think they're working hard, but actually they did like 2 reps less than last week because they're like, oh, I thought I hit failure, but you kind of shit test yourself by looking back at the footage and being like, oh,
watch the rep speed and all that stuff.
Yeah, I like pussied out because sometimes I'm sure you guys have it where you look at your logbook and you're like, how the fuck am I going to do that? And you only hit it because you have it written down that you need to hit it.
But I think this will become something where you're then more advanced. I don't think that you need to use the mobile phone technique anymore when you are very advanced, because then the technique is always the same, or should at least always be the same. We've talked about it, Steve. It should, week number 1, the first set should look like week number 4, the last set of an exercise, right? It should always be consistent, right? Just maybe the facial expression changes then, right? Well, fuck, no, how was I able to survive this? But other than that, this should always be the same. And when it then comes to this, you should already be at a point where you have a very good understanding of RER. And this is also then where we are coming back to the original thing that we've talked about. Then you already feel like 4 RER is challenging, right? And then I don't think that you need something like the mobile device anymore, because you have such a good understanding of the RER concept already. And then you realize that even week number 1 feels hard, and also that you need to focus and concentrate. And once you are at that point, you realize each and every single week is challenging, because each and every single set and repetition requires the most amount of attention and focus. And this is the way I feel now. And I know there's still room for improvement, but this is once again a work in progress, where process where it's like no work in progress, where it's like after a couple of years you just get you are training basically. It's not just so you're basically practicing. Many people think, training, I'm going into the gym and moving around some weights. No, you are basically practicing. I know it's not the most skillful thing, most skillful sport there is, where you're truly practicing, like, I don't know, jumping longer or running faster or so. But it's still, you are, in the grand scheme of things, trying to improve on technique, mind muscle connection, execution, getting the most out of each and every single repetition, right? And once you are at that point also, the end goal becomes kind of less and less important and kind of irrelevant, because you're now so focused on each and every single session and each and every single repetition. And once you are there, you will make progress. It's inevitable. And I think that many people are then caught up in the moment and thinking about caught up in the grand scheme of things and be like, but I want to get to destination A because I want to look that way, right? But just focus on the training sessions and get the most out of each and every single repetition and set, and try to progress, try to make some adjustments for the next mesocycle. And once you are then enjoying that kind of process, you will get better over time.
I'll give a shout
Shall we
out
move
to
on to
Michael just quickly? His understanding of reps in reserve has improved so much. Like he really does nail it. His intensity in his sessions. I love watching his form videos because he's one of the like few people where I don't have to usually say like that wasn't one rep in reserve when I watch it. It's like, yeah, he just has got that perfectly dialed in. He just knows. It's almost like he's got settings on a dial. He's got his week 1 setting, his week 2 setting, his week 3 setting, his week 4 setting. Yeah, he's awesome. Anyway, what were you saying, Pascal?
Should we move on to point number 2? Because otherwise we won't get
run out of
to
time.
Point number 3 anymore. So Steve, go ahead. What's point number 2 for you?
I actually don't know. I think we've covered off a lot of like just basic understandings that we got wrong. Okay, actually, this is a big one because I think, again, all of us have done this. And I have a feeling other people have probably done this as well, where with training, just specificity was my issue. I ended up like 5-3-1. Like 5-3-1 is not like hypertrophic specific training. I did do like, what's it called? 5-3-1, boring but big or something like that. But I was just looking at programs all the time. So whilst I did the hypertrophic specific training, I did Lyle McDonald's generic bulk routine. I think I did like Alberto Nunez's like intermediate routine that he had put out there at one point. And what else? I did 5-3-1, obviously boring but big. I looked at like the Juggernaut Cube method, and I was just trying to like build a program from all of these different programs, and then eventually settled on like daily undulating periodization with like hypertrophy days and strength days. And I think ultimately the thing that held me back was always focusing too much on strength and focusing too much on like the big compound lifts and not taking into consideration like other things. But big compound lifts, barbell lifts, like specific, has to be like a low bar squat, has to be a deadlift off the floor, has to be like a Pendlay row, it has to be barbell bench press, like pause, touch and go. Yeah, overhead press, all of these things. It's like, but were they actually specific to me for hypertrophy? Some like were okay, others not so much. So when I changed that thinking and I didn't get so dogmatic with exercises, because I certainly was for a long time, like I need to deadlift off the floor, I need to do low bar squats because I'm stronger at them, so I should be doing this. Like strength is important to me, I should be doing my strength training. So it wasn't until like, actually, I think it was reading the scientific principles of strength training and kind of learning, the first principles, specificity. Everything in your program should be specific to your goal. And it's like, so my low bar squats.
They teach you that in your PT course.
They probably do.
It's taught by people who don't even understand it, so they don't apply emphasis to the right places. Because one thing I found was I used to be super critical of the PT course, and now a few years later, I actually see the value in it. Yeah, but it's just the people teaching me it had no understanding of what was important and what wasn't. But I had the exact same experience as you, Steve. I focused way too much on strength, not enough on hypertrophy. I thought they were the same thing. That was one of my biggest mistakes.
I think I don't know if I didn't learn about RPE till quite late, and I got injuries before I learned about it. So I knew how to train hard from an early point. I wouldn't say I knew how to train hard with good technique though. I just learned how to break myself, and all the injuries that I've had were from just pushing things too far. And one of them I have now that I'm always going to have is a slap tear in my shoulder. So my shoulder's just, my pressing shit because my shoulder's unstable. Overhead pressing is even worse. But that was just basically just grinding stuff out and also not listening to my body and not resting and recovering. I'd always just do more, push harder, and I'd end up continually trying to progressive overload until it was like progressively underloading. Every week I just get slightly worse. So I would say, yeah, the second big one for me is a lack of specificity, and then like recovery. I just didn't take into consideration that the body can't just keep adapting and getting better and better. I need deload weeks. That was first introduced, I think, in 5-3-1. I probably didn't stick to them though. I'm pretty sure I didn't, because they were every like 4th week or something. I was just like, fuck that. I'm starting the whole program again from baseline. And then all the injuries would come.
Oh, sorry. I think it's also very hard to understand as a new beginner or newbie. I very much dislike the term newbie when it comes to that. It's very hard to understand or grasp the idea of DDoS, what it means. Like, I know that I started with a starting strength back in the days. Okay, that's not how I started, but this was one of the first programs that I actually did. And there it says, like, okay, when you're stalling, reduce the load and rework your way back up again. And even there, I was struggling, right? Even though it said on paper how to go about it, right? But because you never felt how it is, or you had no understanding about it, it was even hard to grasp and understand these very, very easy and fundamentally important things, right? Because once again, you had no understanding of anything at all. Everything was new to you. The entire world was new to you, right? And then you had to figure out how to walk. And that's also one of the reasons why when you don't have a coach by your side, and no one to show you, also someone like Harry, you brought it up earlier, like a proper bodybuilding gym. Yes, even though there are some bros, right? They will tell you like, okay, lift that way. Here's
Train
the
harder,
program.
you fucking pussy, is what they'd say.
Yeah, but man, I mean, they are still telling you like, okay, here. Even though that some of the technique may be questionable, right? They most of the time still put an emphasis on like proper technique so that you're not fucking yourself over, right? While quarter repetitions may not be the best, they are still like, okay, mindful about it. Don't go too fast because of time under tension, right? Maybe some of the principles may be there for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. They are still fundamentally sound in many, many ways. And if they are then giving you a diet of like, okay, chicken breast, rice, and vegetables and stuff like that, in it for itself, that's a good meal, right? And if you then are being thrown out by yourself and you don't know how to swim, man, it is very, very hard to get an idea of what really to do and how to really progress forward. And yeah, I think you can easily get lost when you are starting, especially nowadays with the internet when there's so much information that is then also conflicting with another.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
I'll also, just to add to that, I can remember running 531 and it would have you like, and this is my point, is not appreciating sub-maximal work. I always thought I had to be working at my max. So when 531 was like, you do 5 reps at this or whatever, basically you work through 531 and you do like a plus set each time. I hated those I just saw them as warm-ups. They were nothing. And it was just, everything was about that max out set. And I would just put absolutely everything into that. And it would just, my numbers were stupid, like to what I should be getting. I was getting way above them. So it was obviously, I just didn't appreciate the lighter training ever. And like the accumulation of good solid work. And like, yeah, it was just, it's interesting thinking back and looking at like the two of the biggest principles are, I had progressive overload, right? Like I would push things harder, but like fatigue management, specificity, big ones that were lacking. So that would be, and I think technique, I just didn't really, like I always had okay technique, I think, on things. Like I knew I needed to have okay technique, but
I don't think we had enough repetition of technique though, because we'd have good technique until we hit high intensities and then it would go to shit.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm much less likely to let that happen just because of how many more years I've had practicing those movement patterns.
Have you already said your second mistake, Harry? That was a very short one, right?
Mine's a pretty quick one, I think. I was going to say, I didn't spend any time in a calorie deficit for about 4 or 5 years. Sorry, calorie surplus for about 4 or 5 years.
Man, you're always taking my points away. Because the last one was already like, yeah, it ties into what Harry already said. And this one was actually what I want to say myself.
I'll give it a couple minutes and I'll let you explore it more fully. Yeah. But because the background of being a fat kid, I'd always pedestalized the skinny kids and the kids with abs and stuff like that. And then all through school, I didn't have that much confidence. I wasn't like majorly influenced in any way by any like psychological problems. But I definitely had it in my mind that if I managed to lose my body fat and got like shredded, then my life would sort itself out and it'd be amazing. So I was in pursuit of being shredded for so long, but I just almost like the same sort of thing. I'd look at like someone article saying, "Oh, you need a calorie deficit." I'm like, boring. I need to find I need to find the magic diet that's going to help me get there. And then I was trying to grow muscle and not eating enough. And yeah, basically the first real massing phase I did was about 3 months long. And I just used serious mass like 3 times a day, got fat as fuck, got up to like 95 kilos. And for people who know what I look like based on Instagram and stuff now, I'm 82 kilos now. So I was 95 kilos and I had probably 5 kilos less muscle than I have now.
Have I ever seen a picture of you being fat? I think I've never.
There aren't any.
The only pictures, the only pictures I've seen from you from back in the days was when you were very, very skinny and very young.
Yeah, because
But Fat Harry, never seen a fat Harry.
I was the fat kid. Me and my best mate, funnily enough, used to argue over who was fatter. As in, I'd say, "You're the fat kid." He'd be like, "No, you're the fat kid."
And then you hugged each other and said like, "We are both fat."
Neither of us wanted to be the fattest kid in the class from when I was aged like 10 to, no, probably like 8 to 12.
Yeah.
It would be like, "No, you're fatter than me." And he'd be like, No, you're fatter than me, mate. It was like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just didn't spend any time in caloric surplus, and I can't even put my finger on why. It probably was the fact I hadn't had any experience of being lean, that I'd had it in my head as being something so like holy and amazing that I needed to experience that. And then I was basically trying to grow muscle all the time on one hand, but then at the same time I was trying to lose body fat constantly too. So I was just stuck in this perpetual kind of, I guess, like metronome, like swinging back and forth for probably about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Mate, you basically just explained how I was as well. So I was a former fat kid, right? And then I was actually very, very lean when I got to Berlin. And when I got introduced to lifting, I was so afraid of gaining weight. So afraid of gaining weight. And then I once did a gaining phase with Texas Method. So the intermediate program from Starting Strength. And of course, bulking with that one, I mean, wasn't really the most productive bulk, right? But I went from around 72 kilograms up to 80 kilograms. And ever since then, I had a hard time actually lowering my weight. And I think that I still built a decent amount of muscle mass, even though that it wasn't the most productive thing during that time. But yeah, that was then the only true committed gaining phase for a very long time. And then I was just like spinning my wheels, going back and forth. Same as you, Harry. When I'm looking back, I had no proper explanation and rationale for that behavior or for that decision of not committing to a gaining phase. It was just like,
For me, I was never lean enough to justify it.
Yeah, exactly. I was feeling whenever I got into a gaining phase, I looked at myself and be like, no, you are actually fat. So you should rather be cutting. But I was at a point, whenever I was starting cutting, I was immediately feeling the negative adaptations of that. And after 2 weeks, I was then looking at myself and be like, you are not carrying any kind of muscle mass. So you should rather be gaining. And then I was actually going back and forth in a kind of bi-weekly kind of cycling fashion. And I've spent time like that in a very long, for a very long time. And I think also one of the explanations I would have nowadays is just a lack of knowledge and lack of perhaps even self-confidence. But I will also say lack of knowledge, because I simply didn't know better. I would have loved to have someone by my side to actually tell me like, okay, this is what you need to do now. And I actually tried to seek out for help. I was actually on Reddits and stuff like that and asking for like, okay, what do you think? Bulk or cut, right? There was even a subreddit where it was just purely for bulking or cutting, making a decision. And of course, you get so many different opinions, and it didn't help at all. It didn't help at all, right? And I would have wished to have my experience now where it's like, okay, this is something that you have to do, and actually you will benefit from that. But this is something that I didn't see during that time. I should have gained, because that would have been putting me in a much, much better position than constantly trying to actually stay leaner and also then building muscle during that period of time. And then jumping straight back into a cutting phase. And for the majority of my lifting career, I've been in a cutting phase, which is very unfortunate. But the majority of that time was more so in my early lifting days. Now, for the last, I would say 2.5 years, I can wholeheartedly say that I was in a caloric surplus for the majority of my time. Even like in 2018 to 2019, I was like in a surplus for like a year. And that really made a change. Really made a change.
Yeah, definitely. How warm and fuzzy do you feel when you meet someone in the gym or something like that who's a newbie and you ask them what they're doing and they're like, and they have all the right things laid out in front of them, like they've never trained before and they've got a really good progressively overloaded training plan, they're in a calorie surplus, they're focusing on their technique and stuff. It's literally like a shiny Charizard. It's like,
yeah, it's funny.
I can only think of 2 guys in my entire life who I've met who are like that, and you just like,
that's yes. Why some of the people in our forum who are like 17, 18, 19 years old, and you see some of the pictures and being part of the community, I'm just like, man, come over here, let me give you a hug.
Yeah.
You came to the right
You're saving
place.
yourself 8
Buddy,
years at least.
That is great. I wish it was me, my former self, right? I'm the future self speaking to my former self and be like, buddy, this is actually what you want to do, right? And that's why I always see those people who are very young, who have a great potential, great starting point, and who are actually doing the right thing at a very early age. And I'm just like, man, don't fuck things up. Don't do anything irresponsible or stupid. Put in the work and effort for like the next 5 to 10 years, and man, you will outshine so many people. So many people. Just be patient and continue educating yourself the way you do now, and nothing will stop you anymore.
My former self wouldn't have listened to my current self. If I went back in time and spoke to my former self and said, you're an idiot, you're doing everything wrong, you should do X, Y, and Z, my former self would go, fuck you, man, you don't know me. And then he'd carry on doing what he was doing.
I think it's hard. A lot of, like, because these mistakes, I am thinking, like, similar to what you guys and what you're saying there, Pascal, it's very few people are of that age who think they don't know it all, or they can't, I don't know, something about that age and you don't have a lot of money, so you don't want to like invest in like a coach or like in
spending 200 quid a month on supplements though.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like,
but I really had no money when I moved to Berlin. I was living off of 450 euros a month, and my rent was 220. So, yeah, I had no money. I mean, come on. But yeah, it is very much this though. When you are young, you think you know better. You think you have it all figured out. And I mean, when I look back at my early 20s, man, was I spoiled. Fuck. I would love to get back and give him a slap. Come on, guy. You have no idea.
I wish I could apologize to that coach who was trying to help me, who I basically just told to get lost because he didn't know anything. I still can. There's nothing stopping me from contacting him, yeah.
And I think that, I don't know if this is my third one, but something I definitely have got better at is like listen. I don't know, it's difficult because I don't want, because there's a certain sweet spot where you listen to enough people like who you trust and have good information. But again, how do you even know who to trust and have good information? That's a
blue tick, you trust them.
Blue tick, yeah, if they're jacked.
Yeah, that's the verification.
I think I switched from, the people who are jacked, like in just like the bros and, don't know, the flex magazines and those sort of things, and seeked out like actual coaches and like scientists. And I think that was definitely helped by, I think actually probably a big influence was Luke Johnson from Shredded by Science, and bringing over Alan Aragon at the start, and then going to those seminars and conferences and then finding a community. That was such a, I know this isn't a mistake, but I think it was a mistake if I hadn't done this, and it was a mistake not to have, I don't know, the internet opened this opportunity up, and rather than trying to seek help from like random people over on forums, which I also did, and I also was doing, actually seeking advice from the experts in the field who are evidence-based. That was just a complete and utter game changer for me, because they actually taught me things. They didn't just push me onto programs or push me onto their way of doing things, or this worked for me. It was, no, these are the principles behind what you should be doing. I always think of like Brad Schoenfeld, who's just so like, for someone who is just looking for like a black and white answer, you're just never going to get that from Brad. He will never ever give a black and white answer to most things, at least. There's very few things, which is really hard to navigate. But then you kind of come into this community and you can get all and gather that information. And I think that was a big reason why our podcast even began, was because I was like, shit, I need to get this great information out to more people. This is why Mike Israetel came over the first time, and why we keep bringing him over, because this is just a mistake that it's so easy to land into. And on that bombshell, I probably need to drop off because I've got a consultation, but you two can keep going.
Oh man, Steve. Yeah, that's all right. We will finish the section here with the last point.
I can leave and it'll be fine, won't it?
Yeah.
Cool. See ya.
So.
Cheers, Steve.
So Harry, point number 3. Give it to me.
Point number 3. I was all lost in what Steve was saying. I haven't got anything in my head.
I didn't even listen. I'm never listening to Steve. I'm just like totally switching off. My thoughts are somewhere else. And then I'm going back again and be like, I'm just guessing what he said. And something comes out of my mouth most of the time.
You know what? I think my biggest mistake is, right, if I say not biggest mistake, my third, I guess, most important mistake, or most influential mistake that I've made, was just not paying enough attention to other people. And I know that sounds a bit vague, but for example, like, just I would say, look at someone, and just because they were like, I perceive them to be a bro, I would immediately just think their information was useless to me. And wouldn't listen to it or wouldn't do anything. And then I suppose that wraps up in the sense that, like, I found the T Nation forums pretty early on, and I basically felt like the reason I wasn't making progress was because I hadn't read the next article, all the articles and stuff like that. And I know this is very similar to like the point I already made, but yeah, I think it all comes down to just I think it all comes down to self-confidence, really. Just I wasn't able to trust myself to put together a program because I was just constantly, I suppose it's when you're at the point, when you're hearing information for the first time. Like, we're fortunate now, we've been in the industry for like a few years coaching, that there's almost nothing new that we hear. Whereas a few years ago when I was getting into this, every time I heard, like, say the term DUP, like daily undulating periodization, or RPE, it was the first time I was hearing it. So then you have like that shiny object syndrome where you suddenly, I have to implement daily undulating periodization, suddenly I have to implement RPE, suddenly I have to implement 531 and then German volume training and stuff like that. And then it's very much a case, like Steve alluded to, like just moving from program to program is basically the same as just giving someone a meal plan. They don't learn the principles behind it. And I think that's where I was trapped. I was just bouncing from program to program to program. I was writing off any information if it came from someone I didn't perceive to be credible, and I would judge their credibility based on just nonsensical things like, oh, this person, he's jacked, but he's not famous, so what can he know? Like that kind of stuff. But I think I'm just rambling now. So what's your take on it then?
It kind of very much ties into that as well, and ties into everything we talked about. And I think that is the point we saved for last. So that was, of course, not planned or intentional, but this is something that I do remember also putting there as point number 3 in the forum post, is not getting a coach. Thinking also, such as you, thinking I know better, thinking there's no value in actually getting someone who guides me. And because of that, I wasted a lot of years. And I know, and I've talked to so many people over the years, it's the same for them as well. A coach can actually guide you and teach you, and you will avoid making the same mistakes that he had to do in order to get where he is, right? So this is a normal development, a normal kind of evolution of human society and the race, right? Someone is making an innovation or discovery, and upon that discovery and innovation, the next generation is actually building their knowledge, and because of that, they are actually finding new things and innovating new things. Thus, it would be foolish if everyone would always disregard what has been discovered or made up before that, because then we would just like spin our wheels and be there where we've been, like, I don't know, centuries
the dark
ago.
Ages where you just keep relearning the things we learned 1,000 years before.
Exactly, because knowledge isn't passed to the next generation. And I don't know where this idea comes from, right? Where people think, I don't need a coach. There's no value in that. Because in every aspect of your life, having a mentor, having a teacher, having someone who guides you is beneficial. There's never no value in that. Never, ever. Right? And especially because bodybuilding is such a long-term process, and it requires a lot of time and patience and effort, and also trial and error. Right? Having someone by your side who can then tell you like, okay, avoid this because this is something that I already done and this doesn't really work. So skip that part, jump to the next one. Let's start here and let's actually do the trial and erroring from this part onwards so that we actually can figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And then on another note, because he's your mentor and because he has gained a lot of he has gathered a lot of experience due to all of the clients that he has worked with, he has seen a lot of things already that you can't learn in a textbook or so, right? You can actually pick his head and be like, okay, whenever you have a question, you can actually ask him, especially something like, for example, I was always seeking the questions myself then on the interwebs. That took me a lot of time because I then first had to learn what is useful information or what is just bullshit. So that already took a lot of time. Then secondarily, I was still confused. I still couldn't figure out what is like proper information. Then I had to go out there and actually ask around. Then I landed on things such as the Reddit. I asked for advice. You get so many different opinions that you are in a form of decision fatigue.
Too.
Exactly. And then I wasted so much time. And then we haven't even spoken about something like proper programming, someone who explains to you the reason as to why we're doing deloads, for example, how to properly execute a deload, then also something like proper form lifting techniques, someone you can send your form and lifting videos to, because I've all figured it out myself. And I wasted a lot of time with that. I could have saved myself a lot of hassle, a lot of pain as well due to injury, and just a lot of time. And that time I will never get back. And everyone who listens now, who is still, it doesn't even matter whether you're 35 or 40 or so, or very much in your 20s, one of the best investments that you can do is actually getting a coach. Because you are basically paying for your time, which is the most precious good that every human has. This is something that you can't earn. You will never get back, right? So instead, money you can always earn. Money is always fluctuating.
Show me how to always earn this money.
6 figures. Yeah. No, but money comes and goes, right? You can spend it, but you can also, when you put in the work and effort, you can always get it back. And you can even increase your wealth when it comes to that. Time, you can't earn that. You can't
Investing
get that
into
back.
Coaching too.
Right? And why?
Unlearn it. You can't unlearn what you've been taught.
Yeah, and why are you then not willing to exchange something that is kind of worthless? Like money is only a belief that we have in a paper, right? In a currency.
It's a concept.
Yeah. And why aren't you willing to change, to exchange that form for your time? Your time should always be so much more precious to you than this kind of paper money, that form of a belief, that concept. It is worthless. If the world goes to shit tomorrow, that currency can be worth nothing. And we've seen it so often in history with hyperinflations. The first hyperinflation that took place was actually like in the Roman Empire, or one of the first ones in the Roman Empire. And that just continued over and over and over again. So why you aren't willing to actually give away that kind of useless piece that comes and goes, that you can get whenever you want to, right? For something that is invaluable, and that is time. I don't know, and I don't get, because, and this is also where I've been getting a lot of where I was just maturing over the years. When I was now going back, I would immediately get a coach, because I would save so much of my time, and I would basically invest in myself. And investing in yourself is the best investment that you can do.
I think in the early days, I almost perceived watching like the Jack guys on YouTube and stuff like that as like an affordable form of coaching. Because I'd perceived that I'd never even done any research into personal trainers. I just presumed that I couldn't afford them because obviously I was like a teenage kid. But someone like I've been working with this client in person. He's 19, and I just feel like I have to remind myself so frequently when I'm in those training sessions that he's only 19, and I feel like the technique he's training with is fucking incredible. His intensity is incredible. Like I just feel like, why couldn't I have been this 19-year-old who, despite obviously not being in the strongest financial situation, really saw the value in how much he could fast track his learning by investing into coaching. And just feel like every time I see this guy, I just want to give him a massive pat on the back and just like remind him, like, you did the right thing. Like, you've skipped out. Like, but he's aware too. Like he says to me, he's like, I feel like by hiring you, I'm skipping. Oh, sorry, I'm not. I'm going to make those 5 years of progress that you didn't make. Like, I'm going to skip that first 5 years you didn't make progress. I'm like, yes.
And that's the mindset. That is the exact same thing. I mean, we've been talking about, and I wanted to hit home here in regards to what I've been talking about. He got it. He will save so much time that he would otherwise waste. He would perhaps get to the same destination, but with much more pain, with much more suffering, with much more stress and all that kind of stuff, and probably in a much older position without having then the opportunity of actually getting even further.
And worst case scenario, they would abandon the goal because they feel like it's just futile trying to achieve it. Or the horrible things when you talk to someone who has the perception that something is completely unattainable because they tried and couldn't do it. And you feel like, oh, you were just like, it's almost like they were in a cave with no torch, and it was like the right pathway was over there, and they spent the whole time feeling on this wall over here.
That's a very good analogy, actually. Yeah. No,
and
absolutely.
Then over there the whole time you're just like, oh, it's just right there. Just
No, cool. I think that sums it up. We're now on time when it comes to 1 hour and 10 minutes. I think that's a nice time to end things here. Harry, do you have anything else that you wanted to actually throw out here, or?
Do I have anything else to add? We could just start advertising all of our products we have.
Yeah, I just want to say we ended the thing here with a coaching, so this is the Coach's Corner. I mean, when you want to actually have a coach by your side, you know where to find us, right? revivestronger.com/online-coaching. Yeah, that's the one. Probably popping up somewhere here as well. Then you can actually work with one of the coaches on Team Revive Stronger. Other than that, guys, of course, if you can't afford it, then I don't care. You still have to pay us. No, of course, we then have the resources such as the member side. You can always join there for £6.99 per month, right? There's a thriving community, lots of educational content as well. And then we have the minicut movement now, where you then can sign up for £99 and you'll be just guided through an entire minicut. And you can get somewhat of an idea of what it may look like working with us at Revive Stronger. And then you can still decide. I mean, basically, in a nutshell, you're saving yourself a lot of time because you don't have to go through the same mistakes that we have gone through. And if you are there already, that you have made all of those mistakes, props to you. Still, you can sign up if you want.
Don't make any more mistakes.
Exactly. So guys, thank you very much for listening and tuning in. And I guess I'll speak to you very soon.
Thanks for tuning in.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.